started this, our county commissioner came to me and said, Steve, please don't do this. And I said, well, why not, Commissioner? These great ideas. We're just going to have some really great things. And he said, He said, the north part of the county, which is, I believe, right up here, he said, just finish something like this. And by the time they got to our chambers, there were 200 ball caps for and 200 T-shirts against. He said, you're going to force me to vote against half of my constituents. Don't do this. And I said, I tell you what, Commissioner, if you'll give me the full support of your planning district, of your planning department, I will not bring it before your chamber if we have more than 30% opposition received. And he said, that's a deal. And so we formed the Chattahoochee Hill Country Alliance. We had that. To belong, it was $2 an acre. And by the time we took it to the commission, we had 80% of the land paying dues into the organization to support these concepts. So it really had nothing to do with what the commissioners thought. They weren't about to vote against an area that 80% of the people were on record as supporting it. And we had not one word of opposition during the hearings. So that's the key thing, is to really get a consensus among all the diverse groups that you'll have in a group. And we had diverse groups. It was a 2-year process. It wasn't that easy. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that journey. We became familiar with the area almost 20 years ago now. We were living right in the heart of Atlanta. We were what we'd call urban people. I grew up on the farms of Colorado, and I could hardly wait to get away, and certainly didn't want to go back to all that hard work. But on an afternoon drive, we'd heard about a historic farm for sale, and my wife, who was a city lady, said, oh, wouldn't it be fun, let's drive out and see. And so I called announcing that we had no interest in buying anything, but we were going to take a Sunday afternoon drive, and could we just stop and show our small children the farm? And of course, when we arrived, they had the Shetland pony saddled. They took us riding on the open Jeep, and the deer were bounding, the bunnies nibbling along the path, my wife sitting next to me going, oh, we bought the farm. And that started our weekend journeys out to the country. Now, we had a big house in the city with a pool and a movie theater and pink Barbie cars and everything I could buy those darling little girls. And to my amazement, every Friday afternoon, they had the car packed, and they could hardly wait to leave all that to get out to the country, where we didn't want another big house, so we'd rented the main house out. We fixed a little shack in the back. We squeezed in that shack, and there were no toys, TVs, computers, anything, just a puzzle for rainy days. And that was my value shift in understanding the importance of nature in all of our lives. And so 3 years later, I sold the company, we sold the houses in Atlanta, and we retired. And so that was 7 years of what I call bliss, or my time in the wilderness. We resigned all the boards and sort of disappeared. And then we had the threat of development, and we thought there were a couple instances where we thought the subdivisions were going to come in. And that really started this journey where we got to know Shannon and started this whole movement. I think that's right. And the Urban Land Institute did a study several years ago saying that while we all know development should happen where the infrastructure is, 70% of the development was going to continue to be in the greenfield. And there were very few examples of a better way to actually treat the greenfield. Now, this is a different way of presenting what Shannon showed. They determined, that doesn't really work, does it, as a pointer? That if we just did what metropolitan Atlanta has done over the last 20 years in 15 counties, we were about to disturb 80% for 30,000 houses. But when we came together as a community 2 years later and passed, it shows that we're going to disturb less than 30% of the land, and we'll actually put 20% more houses in that area by clustering. What's more, infrastructure costs are about 40% of what they would be under traditional development. So it was a win-win, whether it was the development, the governmental agency, or the people that were worried about preservation. So Serenbe is developing as the hamlet where you have to have at least 200 acres. Now we have 1,000 acres at this point, but we entitled the first 200 to show what could be done, or the first 224. And so you can see we're a balance between that rural and urban. Really the closest thing you see in America is the country, you don't see it in America, you see it in the countryside of England, is really what we used. Our land planner, Phil Tabb, who did our planning, did his doctorate on the English village system. And so we have the little shops in the little community where you walk, but we also have the rural. You can see from the air, very different than that slide we saw earlier where you have to put all the roads in if you're doing that idea of 5, 10, even 20 acre farmettes. It really does disturb the landscape because you have to run roads and access to all those places. With this clustered idea, you can really save much larger masses of the land. At Serenbe, what we have developed now, it's 224 acres, 2 clusters of communities. Every house backs up to a preserved forest, a wildflower meadow, a pasture with animals, or the organic farm. We have 150,000 square feet of retail office planned. In this area, 224 dwellings, but we have 157 acres already preserved. But when we get through, we will have 700 acres preserved, attached to thousands of acres preserved, which is amazing. We have a 20-stall barn and the pastures and the 25-acre organic farm. That's all part of that. So Serenbe is that wonderful mix between the rural and the urban. Now, another thing is when you do develop, how does it look? And Shannon mentioned the buffers, which are key. So this is the main entrance to Serenbe. It's not a lot different than someone's driveway. So we really have to have buffers to where you don't see the houses and the development from the street. I love it. All the retail folks that when we were doing it said, well, Steve, you're absolutely nuts coming out here in the middle of this forest. And you probably won't have any retail businesses survive. But if they want to have a chance, put them up on the road on your main intersection. And those people all come today and want to know who's handling our retailing, why we don't have any shops empty, and why everyone's thriving right in the middle. It's because we created a sense of place and we're destinations for people to come to. And not many people are doing that. Everyone thinks about convenience rather than really creating a sense of place, and that's what really makes a difference. There you see the townhouses. They know the rural setting. It sets in. We keep everything in natural landscapes. This is one of our light posts at the crosswalk. All blueberry bushes in that area of the development. There's where the farms are. 70% of our common area landscaping is all edible. So there at the crosswalks are all the blueberry bushes. But a lot of other benefits too. The Business Chronicle did a big story about Serenbe being the lungs to Atlanta, or the Chattahoochee Hill Country. The trees saved on our land alone is equivalent to keeping 7,000 cars off the streets of Atlanta. So there's a lot of benefits in addition to just the preserved land. Incredible foster a sense of community when you put people in clustered areas. I think a doctor and his wife that have had a weekend house at Serenbe now for 5 years, about a month ago had a wedding party for their daughter who was from she was living out of state. The groom was from out of state. And so she had a party the Thursday before the wedding so their friends could get to know, could meet the future son-in-law. And she looked at me and she says, I'm amazed. We've lived at our house in Buckhead right in the center of Atlanta for 20 years. And we invited hardly anyone from there. Everyone's from here. She says, I got to thinking about why that is. And she said, there we pull in to the garage, we go into our house, and I know all my neighbors. I go to their Christmas party, but I see them maybe once or twice a year. And she says, I come down to Serenbe, I park the car. First thing I do is walk down the street to the mailbox. And by the time I get back, I've encountered 2 or 3 people. I know exactly what's happened in the 4 or 5 days since I've been here. And this is my community. And so when we live densely in a planned area, it's really amazing what it does. There are tests coming out now about the importance of both mental and physical health, depending on your relationship to natural nature. So the big thing is to save land, which allows for all the agrarian kind of activities that we had 70, 80 years ago when we were a healthy and happier society, I believe. This is the Serenbe stables. We have 20 stalls and all the pastures. We're more of a starter or recreational type facility, but it's a wonderful area. But the area allows for the much bigger eventing. The Bucolic Farm's an eventing area, and this facility is on 8,400 acres. So we have the complete variety. We have another fox hunting farm. We have several large-scale horse activity farms throughout the area. And of course, our farms. This is Serenbe's Farmers Market. We have a CSA program that last year served 120 families, probably more this year. We have a Saturday market, and it's just incredible. And this is taking land that was depleted from cotton, and through composting, she can now harvest per acre equivalent to some of the best loam soils. So it's you can do this with any land anywhere. Now here's the real thing. We have 98-mile trail system planned that connects the development trails with the community trails, so it becomes all common land. And we're in the midst of getting this off the ground now. Within Serenbe, we have 7 miles already, but then those 7 will connect to these 98 miles, which really makes it for a complete unique area. I mentioned that some of the studies coming out, and this was a study out of Europe where they studied 24 diseases, and they found in 15 it was improved your connection directly to natural nature. This just quickly shows why Serenbe is different. We started showing it geographically, and this is everybody developing in the Chattahoochee Hill Country. Balanced growth, there are the same number of houses on the left as there are the right. Minimal disturbance in the grading, so we leave the trees around. The smaller footprint versus the McMansions. A walkable community rather than having to get in our cars to go everywhere. We do not have any lawns. It's no pesticides. We pull the front porches up so they're actually rooms that people know and they get to know their neighbors. I mentioned the tree versus the smog. Our kids, they're out in the streets, they're out in the pathways, in the tree houses, and rather than at the computers, and so it's much healthier. And then, of course, everyone growing or eating the locally grown food versus the preserved foods. A lot of alternative energy sources. You know, if we really cut down, we wouldn't have to be worried about what kind of energy plants to build. And then we have a natural wastewater system versus a chemical induced. It's all gravity flow, and we do all of our irrigation with it. The New York Times has called Serenbe in the Chattahoochee Hill Country the Utopia, and we certainly think so. One of the big foundations is hospitality. We have a country inn with 19 rooms, so we have 3 restaurants. This fall we'll be opening our 4th restaurant. So you can come for an afternoon, a weekend, or a lifetime. So we'll save the rest of the time for questions for both Shannon and I as to how we did this and what it's like now and what some of the challenges are.